Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Enrico De Castro, and you are tuning into the What's in Your Case podcast. Our guest today performs in improvisational and open mic comedy shows around Sacramento, reads tarot for individuals and at events, and provides trauma-informed counseling for event planning and curriculum development. My guest and friend, Carrie, or as they're known, the Empowering Educator.
A lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Don Rico. I am very excited to be here, and it's always so fun to hear myself reflected back to me. So thank you for that.
Empowering Educator is an interesting name. What exactly is the origin of your name?
Great question. I transitioned out of the classroom in 2021 due to extreme burnout in the classroom, and initially envisioned an entrepreneurial journey in which I was helping teachers to center their own wellness. So the idea behind Empowering Educator was sort of this present progressive, if we're getting really technical about language here, because I am a former French teacher, so also a language nerd. It's this ongoing process of continually empowering oneself to show up to our classroom situations as fulfilled, whole, and content individuals, and seeing how that has a ripple effect in the classroom and then in school communities and the world. And I worked hard at that for about a year and kept having this internal struggle about how much I had been supported through my tarot practice and how much I really wanted to integrate this teacher wellness piece with this performing tarot comedy persona I had sort of created. And so about a year ago, I just kind of meshed everything and figured that Empowering Educator became me. I was the person who was leading and creating situations, learning, and environments where people could be empowering and be empowered by a former educator. So it sort of started in one direction and has completely gone to the other end of whatever spectrum that is. And so now that has just kind of been this, onstage persona where it's not so much I am reading you the future of the cards or the spirituality of the cards. I am just creating an environment where you can feel connected to yourself within it. And so I try to do that in a way that feels very accessible, because a lot of times spirituality has I don't want to say gate kept, but it does feel a little bit like only certain people can access it. And I really think it's for everyone.
You and I met early February during an open mic hosted by Speak Out Sacramento.
That's right.
That's where I was introduced to your specific brand of comedy. I mean, we had comedians on the podcast before, but it's nothing like what you do. You're a stand-up tarot comedian. Could you explain a little bit about what that means?
I will do my best, Enrico, because I'm still figuring it out as we're going. But yes, I love the Speak Out Sacramento open mic opportunity. That was the first time I had done it, was in February at Teetotalist here in Sacramento, which is an alcohol-free social club. And it was packed that night. I mean, what a great, glorious crowd of artists and supporters. And I was fortunate enough to be given a spot. And at that point, I had really only been doing this blend of stand-up comedy infused with tarot card readings for like a month. So that was a very fresh version of my act. And it landed. People were really into it. I had people yelling out, great questions from the audience. I had done it at a couple other open mics. And really what I found was that it was a lovely blend of how do we take the ridiculousness of being humans and existing on this planet during this time, kind of make it a more communal experience, because that's what comedy is, right? Like comedians make these observations about how life is, and then people laugh at them because you kind of share the taboo, or you don't feel so alone in what you're thinking or noticing, or yeah, how you exist in the world. So I just felt like the tarot being this representation of the human experience, all different aspects of the human experience, how could I weave that into a stand up comedy performance? And actually, my next iteration of this act is to embody the cards. So I've been working on different personalities for each of the cards, different voices, affects, and rather than it being me as Carrie, the empowering educator, interpreting the card for the question, I will essentially slip into a persona, which will include an accent or a voice or something to deliver whatever the messaging of the card is to the question at hand.
How many tarot decks do you have?
About maybe 8 or so. They're all different. They all have different visual representations of the cards. Some of them are pretty traditional, some of them are completely modern, others take a abstract perspective of illustrating the cards. Some are more similar to a regular deck of playing cards. So it's fun because that helps to deepen my interpretation of each of the cards, because whenever I pull a card, I'll sort of have this running visual in my mind's eye of how such and such deck showed it or another deck showed it. Because what a lot of people will tend to do is just read a guidebook and sort of study it. But a guidebook is written by one person usually. So I find it to be really helpful to kind of pick and choose what really resonates with me from multiple sources. And that's what I encourage other people to do if they explore it.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was given a set of cards, but it's based off of D&D.
Hmm.
So I'm still at that stage where I'm still looking at the guidebook. So you're saying to explore the different decks so you have more of an understanding outside of the guidebook of the cards you're pulling.
Yeah, and actually, what I have heard as very, I think, practical advice is to throw out the guidebook sometimes, or at least don't look at it and take it for the only interpretation. So I have a lot of improv training, and with improv comedy, the thing that we tend to do is take an idea that someone tells in a story, and then we what's called A to C it. So this idea reminds me of this idea, which reminds me of this idea. So you go from A to B to C, and then that's the thing you do the scene about. So what I would encourage you to do, Don Rico, and any other of your listeners who explore the tarot, is to start with your own interpretation. So just look at the card, look at every single detail. Is there a person on there? Is there an environment on there? Are there certain colors, numbers, images? And then for you, you get to A to B to C it and just say, okay, this reminds me of this, which reminds me of this. So I believe that this card means X. And then you could check your work in the guidebook if you want to, but I'm even reluctant to suggest that because, again, that's just one person's interpretation. It's probably a collaboration between a writer and an illustrator for most tarot decks. So you're going to have what is a creative collaboration between a couple of people, that things get lost in translation among that process, but then it doubly gets lost when it makes it to someone who has never interacted with those people before and doesn't have their lived experience. So I think it's really important that people draw on their own lived experience when they're studying the tarot, because that's what's going to resonate with you. That's going to be the deepest way that you can identify with the cards from your own experience rather than what someone else wrote in a guidebook.
And you had mentioned collaboration, which brings me into my next point. You were part of a collaborative show called Raise the Vibrations, hosted by V-Day Sacramento and Take Back the Night. I know that you personally are involved with so many other events that run similar to Raise the Vibrations. What other groups have you had the chance to work with?
I am really kind of putting a lot of feelers out there to see what vibes, because what tends to happen in the strict stand-up comedy world is you run around to every open mic in town, you try to hit, 4 to 7 a week to just try to get your 5 minutes up there to refine your set by doing it over and over and over again. And that's not something that I'm really interested in, because my set is not something that feels like I just want to kind of put it out there in a dive bar on like a Tuesday night to drunk people. My set feels a little bit more personal and a little bit more sacred. So when I heard about Raise the Vibration, I had been a part of V-Day Sacramento in 2020, just prior to the pandemic and everything shutting down. And I did the Vagina Monologues with them, which I have been a part of multiple times throughout my life and love their mission. So this Raise the Vibration was an opportunity for me to perform my original work, as you got to do as well, Donrico, and be able to become a part of a collective that was really focused on healing and sharing the power of our own experiences. That really drew me in. And then you also mentioned Speak Out Sacramento, which happens roughly monthly. And that's another group of, I would say, predominantly queer artists who tend to come together and support one another. And that feels to be kind of like my niche right now. Also with the teetotalists that I mentioned, they have given me graciously a once a month spot at their location to just practice my craft in sort of an intimate setting, because that feels better to me to support, local performance opportunities, local establishments. I really like teetotalist spaces too, because again, when I say like the typical comedy route is drunks and bars, I'm like, nah, I got sober for a reason. So like, that's not really the route I want to go. And then I have a very loving and weird group at the Sacramento Comedy Spot, which I am delighted to be a part of. And I do some performances with Stab Comedy as well. Those are more like traditional improv shows, but they're a chance for me to just kind of like flex my funny bone and play for a while. Whereas when I do the tarot stand-up, pretty discerning about the populations that I like to perform to. And ultimately, I mean, I'm not sure where this is going to go, but I have sort of a vision of either doing a tour where, again, I'm kind of discerning about the types of places that I go, and or doing some kind of like a recorded, whether it's a YouTube show or something along those lines, where I'm bringing on other artists and performers and comedians and doing live tarot comedy with them, because I think that there's just a really fun intersection there.
So you've really built your own community in a way. You have little bubbles that really help push you forward.
Yeah, and I'd say once we sort of gelled as a cast and raised the vibration, it became pretty clear that people were excited about the potential for collaboration there. And it's been less than a month since we've had our show, and we have been, I know personally, I've been itching to like get back together with everyone and kind of be like, all right, what's the next thing? Because I just saw so many beautiful, talented artists, yourself included, whom I could envision hosting, let's say, like a once a month open magic night was kind of this idea that I had, not, a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, but like share your magic with us, whether it's dance or singing or music or comedy or anything really. Like I would love to create something similar to what Speak Out Sac does, where people can just come together and it can be like kind of a really polished open mic where you get to just share your magic and people get to revel in it and you get to just enjoy and be for a night.
Now, another thing that's mentioned on your Instagram is that you're a trauma-informed coach. What exactly does that mean?
Great question. So the trauma-informed field is one that I found my way into through my own healing journey. So when I left the classroom, I really had to reckon with how much I had lost of myself by being an educator for 13 years. I taught middle and high school French, predominantly in upper class white suburbia of both the DC area and then the Sacramento area, and had to deal with a lot of entitlement and a lot less. I don't want to say a lot less support, because honestly, I think people were just doing the best they could, especially during the pandemic. But I knew that if I wanted to, be the person that I wanted to be, that I could no longer do that in the classroom. So I started to work with a coach pretty soon after leaving the classroom, and she was trauma informed. Talked a lot about this organization, which is a training program called NARM, which stands for the Neuroaffective Relational Model. And they were initially formed to support psychotherapists in providing trauma-informed psychotherapy. But they realized that this work could be applied to a much broader spectrum of helpers and healers. And so they have this online basics training program you can pay for and enroll in. And when I say people from all walks of life enroll in it, I mean, it's really all walks of life. You have yoga teachers and Reiki healers and teachers and lawyers and social workers. And all it does is bring in both a top-down approach. So that's the neuro part of this. So how does the brain affect the body? And then the neuroaffective. So then also how do your somatics, how does your body affect the brain? And then relational. So how do you heal in relation with other people, usually some kind of a healer, whether it's a psychotherapist or an educator or a social worker. And how can you do that in a way that's within your scope of practice? So as a teacher, I have a lot of experience holding space for people to help them kind of access the learning on their terms. And so NARM essentially just gave me a lot of affirmation that I was already on the right path, but it gave me very practical tools for how to kind of guide people to their own intuition, to their own inner knowing. And so I've used that since leaving the classroom to support people. I do that through tarot readings. So I do trauma-informed tarot readings where, again, I'm not the expert who is telling you what to do and what the cards mean. Is I'm, facilitating an environment where you feel safe to kind of explore what's going on in your brain, in your body, and through this safe relationship that I've created for them, the cards to speak to you. And then I also have done this with my curriculum coaching, which you mentioned at the top of the episode, where, for instance, I was working with a coach who wanted to create a workbook around boundaries. And it was specifically for, what did she call it? People pleasers, super women, and self-sacrificers. And she was the type of person who would work really hard on something and then completely burn herself out on it and then never want to look at it again. So in our work together, we had to kind of break that pattern of just get it done, because that's not her talking. That's sort of the capitalist structure in which we are all trapped, speaking through her to be like, okay, you just got to do it, just got to do it. And instead, I was able to facilitate a relationship where she could just pause and be with her ideas and then work through them at her own pace to eventually create a workbook that became kind of the foundation for everything else she wants to do. So she wants to do retreats and workshops and classes and stuff. And instead of creating something that she hated and just burned herself out on, we were able to engage in it or with it in a way that became now the foundation for everything that she's going to do. So it's a very meta practice to work with in a trauma-informed way, because it's the way in which you do it, the present moment, that yields the greatest results, as opposed to getting stuck in the story of the past, which is what keeps a lot of people stuck. So the coaching part of it is one of my favorite things that I do. And honestly, my coaching practice hasn't really taken off. So I'm just trying to figure out what are other ways in which I can bring this trauma-informed training into my scope of practice, which at this point now includes tarot and comedy. And then, like I said, kind of holding space for other people.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for being our guest here at the What's in Your Case podcast. Take this time to really promote yourself. Do you have anything that you'd like to promote? And tell our listeners where they can find your content.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Don Rico. This has been lovely to just talk with you again and share a little bit more about what's been going on. So in the Sacramento area, I have a show that happens the second Friday of every month at the Sacramento Comedy Spot. It's called Mercury Reprobates, and it is a tarot and astrology inspired improv show. So we take a local comedian who is the sign of the month, the astrological sign of the month, and we interview them using their natal chart and then whatever cards come out to get information from them. And then we improvise scenes based on what they shared. So at least through July, we are going to be the second Friday of every month. And I'm working on some online programming. So if you're not in the Sacramento area, there are chances to engage with me on Patreon if you want to kind of see my exploration of this card embodiment practice that I'm doing, as well as a collaboration that I have with another astrologer online where we kind of do like an improvisational practice with the tarot cards and kind of look at it through an astrological lens too. So all that's coming for those of you not in the Sacramento area who might want to engage with my experiences online.